ain't see me, you Stevie. Wondering how I reach more evolutions than Evie and make it look easy.
What is up, Earth's mightiest subscribers? It's Ernie, the Blerd without fear. Welcome back to the channel. All right, so today's video, I'm going to be talking about the Superwoman special, which is basically the origin story of how Lois Lane became the new Superwoman. This one is basically an issue that illuminates a lot of things for me, mainly chief among them being that, well, yes, we knew during Absolute Power she had the power armor that had been kind of floating around during the Joshua Williamson run. She used it to help give herself powers to be able to help out during that story arc, but then somewhere in the middle of that, just seemed like that super suit disappeared and she just showed up with superpowers. And I think it led a lot of people to wonder whether or not she gained powers from the suit permanently, or is she wearing the suit underneath a, Superwoman garb, or did she get her powers through the weird power mix-up that happened at the end of Absolute Power, similar to how characters like Black Canary, she lost her powers to the Super Amazos, but when she got them back, it wasn't her canary cry. She now has these weird laser eyes, and various other characters have wound up with various and sundry other powers. It's actually, I think, hinted at one point, the characters Fire and Ice, their powers swap, where Fire has Ice's powers and Ice has Fire's powers. So that's a thing that comes up in this. But what ultimately is revealed is that Superwoman, Lois Lane, got her powers during Absolute Power at the precise moment that the Super Amazos lost their powers in Absolute Power number 4. But it was also because of the power armor that she was wearing. It was connected to the same signal as the Super Amazos. So when the Super Amazos lost their powers and all the powers started floating back out into the ether, because she was still connected to that network, she was able to gain superpowers. Her powers are Kryptonian in nature. However, they seem to have some sort of a limit to them, and it's difficult to say why they have a limit to them. She is able to absorb Earth's yellow sun radiation no differently than Clark can, but it seems like that's where that limit comes from. Maybe somewhere in that moment she absorbed all that radiation, but the power, for whatever reason, is finite. We know that she has superhuman strength, we know she has superhuman speed, but once again, we don't know the full limits of how much she can lift, and we know that while she's superhumanly fast, she's not faster than a speeding bullet. At a moment where we see her use her powers, and in this particular moment using super speed, she still gets shot. Thankfully, she is invulnerable, but that invulnerability can probably only go so far depending on what it is. I guess what compared to a superhuman, a mundane bullet probably is not going to do much damage, but if someone shot her with something that was, more high power, who knows what could have happened. In the end, she has super breath. She can freeze things with her own breath. She has heat vision, as we saw in Superman number 19, and we also know that she has X-ray vision and she can fly. She has pretty much all the powers, but for whatever reason, they're just not as strong as what maybe Clark would have. And with everything that's going on here, knowing that these powers are finite, knowing that they could literally go away at any moment, it's kind of a scary thing, as I talked about with that Superman number 20 video. Yeah, at the time, I didn't have the benefit of having read this issue, but even then, it seemed like, yeah, this is something that could potentially go away at the worst possible time, and it's no wonder Clark is worried, especially when you consider how gung-ho he is with trying to help Lois learn how to be super, and being a good husband and trying to make sure that she knows all the ends to all the things that he can do. And I also like that because she has such a good mentor, and the fact that she has watched Superman do all these things for so long, it's no surprise that she's already pretty good at it. Even just right out of the gate, even before she tells Superman what's actually going on. And it's even more funny when John actually finds out what's going on. Like, oh my God, suddenly he knows that his mom has superpowers. It's kind of a wild occurrence in my opinion. But the really cool part about this, and this is the part that I was kind of saving, is that we don't really know, is that while at first we didn't know where those powers came from. These powers are confirmed to be Kryptonian in nature. However, we do know for a fact that all of the people in the Superman family, they all still have their powers. We see both Supergirl, Kara, and Lana, Superwoman. We see both of these characters still operating as their super personalities. They still have all their abilities. But as it turns out, we do know where those powers come from. And it's because, well, yes, they don't come from the Superman family. They do come from a Kryptonian. And if it's not Superman, it's not Supergirl, it's not John Kent, and it ain't Con-El, it ain't Power Girl either. Who could it have been? Well, it's none other than General Zod. Zod has been stripped of his powers. Now, part of me wonders, since because Lois does not seem to have full total access to all the powers of Kryptonian, some of that may have to do with the fact that she's naturally human. Therefore, since she's human, she can't absorb yellow sun energy the way that Clark normally would, even if she did have Kryptonian powers. It would be one of those weird things where she's basically, it's almost like Chappie. There you go. That's a good example. I actually recently watched Chappie for the first time. It's kind of like Chappie. Chappie has the battery that's literally welded into him. He can't get a new one. Once the battery's done, he's done. That's kind of what it feels like for Lois in this. Once those powers are used up, the powers are gone. But it could also have to do with the fact that these powers were stolen at long range. Zod, to my understanding, was not around during Absolute Power. He was off gallivanting around the cosmos doing his own thing in the Kneel Before Zod story arc by Joe Casey. So that said, it does kind of lead one to wonder exactly what happened there. But that, once again, there's a lot of factors that could play into why this is happening the way that it is. But because we know that Zod is on his way, because he very likely knows who stole his powers, I think we see a little bit of a taste of what the Time Trapper Doomsday was talking about when he said Zod was coming for that ass. And it's because he's gunning for Lois. He's going to want to take his powers from Lois by any means necessary. And it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out, considering that we know that the Justice League has been developing technology to help those metas who lost their powers and regain them. But we don't really know the how and the why of how it really works. How Zod is going to get his powers back is anybody's guess. But if he has to beat them out of Lois Lane, I have the sneaking suspicion he's going to try that. And that might be where we, as we learned in the previous issue of Superman, that Supes is going to lose one of his eyes. And sounds like if there was any time to lose one, it's going to be fighting the guy who's trying to get his powers from Superman's wife.